Welcome into Hockey Hub here on Nesson. We've got so much to get into in the hockey world. More importantly, we've got four nations face off the championship between what better teams would you want to see? USA and Canada getting ready to go down to see who comes out on top. Not to mention is that the Bruins got back in action on Tuesday, which means we got a lot to get into. And if you guys didn't see the news, we got to talk about some defensive pairing stuff that might be taking place with the news of Charlie McAvoy. But who better to break it all down with me than Andy Brickley? It's so weird calling you Andy, but I'm going to just say Brick. Brick, welcome in. What's going on?
Hey, Case. I know you've been with Nesson for several weeks now, but it's our first chance really to connect and have a conversation. So welcome to Nesson. And yeah, let's talk a little hockey because it is on center stage right now.
Thank you. And I'm so glad. I think we're friends already because you're wearing a Tampa Bay hat. I miss home a little bit, but Nesson in Boston has been amazing. So as I mentioned, four nations face off. We're now at the championship, USA taking on Canada. It was already a bit of a bloodbath on Saturday. There's so much conversation taking place as to whether or not Canada will get their revenge. But first and foremost, what have you made of this four nations tournament thus far?
Well, in the interest of full disclosure, before the tournament even started, I was in the camp of curiosity more than excited. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know how much the players were going to value this four-nation tournament. You know, it wasn't a full field. It almost felt like a card holder, a placeholder, I should say, in order to get their ducks in a row as a league in terms of international play, going back to the Olympics next year, World Cup in 28. So I thought this was just something to appease the international best-on-best desire instead of the All-Star game. And then when I watched the first game on Wednesday night last week, you know, between Canada and Sweden, I was saying, wow, now this has got my attention, and it's only escalated. It's only gotten better. The intensity is there. Now you got the rivalry. I think it's been a win-win situation. I think the league and the hockey community got what they wanted, the two best teams in the final, U.S., Canada, especially coming off what happened in Montreal on Saturday night, the start of the hockey game, the way it all unfolded. I'm thoroughly pleased with the results of the tournament, notwithstanding we still have a final to go. But, for somebody that was a little skeptical, I don't even like that word. I was curious, more than excited, but now I'm thoroughly excited, and I can't wait to watch the final.
I love that you painted that picture because I think a number of people, as well as fans and players, were kind of on the reservation side of what this was going to be, because also it kind of replaced, well, not kind of, it replaced All-Star Week, which All-Star Week is the fun and the events, and it's more, on the lighter side of things where the intensity came into this quick, fast, and in a hurry. Now, before we dive into USA versus Canada specifically, I do want to get your opinion on this, Brick. The setup of four nations and kind of like what takes place when a player gets injured, because I feel like that's where the next layer of reservation has come in. Canada faced an early injury when it came to Shea Theodore. USA now having Charlie McAvoy out. Do you think that the system from what they have in terms of who can replace these players was good, or should they look to change that up eventually? Because fans are disappointed. There's probably no Quinn Hughes.
Yeah, well, never say never, right? You never know what's going to happen. But, it's trial and error. It really is. You want best on best. You want a full field in terms of roster. You want the integrity of the game to be where it needs to be. You should not be limited in terms of how many players you have at your disposal, as long as they meet the criteria, as long as they're NHL players under contract with NHL teams. This is an NHL-sanctioned event. I think you should have access to any and all players to make sure you can have a full complement, 12 forwards, 6 defensemen. I think that's the way it should be. And I think they had to make the rules, I won't say they had to make them up, but they had to adjust the rules as we went along due to injuries and sickness. And I think it's only the right thing to do. So it might be a little muddy in terms of the waters and who's available and who's not. But I think the best result, certainly from the fan base perspective, and I think from the four nations, and particularly the two teams in the final, that they should have a full complement on the ice available to the coaching staff, and that is my expectation. You don't want to have to play shorthanded. We watched the Americans play in Game 3 of this series, which didn't matter to them in terms of preparing for the final, other than to continue to have good play habits and play the game the right way. But they were down to 10 forwards very early in that hockey game, when Tkachuk went flying into the net. So you don't want that to have happened. So my expectation is you'll have a full complement to pick from, and you'll have a full roster and a full lineup for both clubs going into the championship.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I was kind of thinking it would have been interesting if they pulled from the same idea as the post COVID or during COVID, the taxi squad. Enough players to pull through to add depth to their rosters just in case. Because one guy goes down, you got a lot going on. I know one head coach that's good with doing that. It's John Cooper. I had a chance to cover him for the past 6-7 years per se. But before I give him too many flowers and too much credit, let's talk about USA. Taxi
All
squad or
right.
no taxi squad, we've got good news, hockey fans. The Tkachuk brothers, the Bash brothers, the heroes of USA right now, whatever you want to call them, they're expected to play in this matchup versus Canada. And we saw what they did on Saturday. And then to add to that, Auston Matthews should be back in the lineup. We've seen how they tilt the ice. We've seen how they have put this team on their shoulder when they need to. But more importantly, we saw what their absence did versus Sweden. The points didn't particularly matter at the time, but I feel like Auston Matthews, while he may not be loading up in the point column, he is good with that transitional play. He is good at helping his team get into the offensive zone and getting things set up. Then you've got Brady Tkachuk and Matthew Tkachuk, who have, of course, a number of skills that they bring to the ice between the physicality, the precision. Jeremy Roenick said the other day, Matthew Tkachuk is such a cerebral player with setting things up. So how do you see things lining up for USA versus Canada now with the good news of these three being involved?
Yeah, the question is how healthy are they? That's the only concern for me, and I hate to start there, but that's first and foremost in my mind because it's so critical to the success of this team. They drag the entire team into the battle, and they bring that intensity, they bring that emotion. This is that next great wave of American talent that really hasn't had the opportunity to play best on best in an international tournament as NHL players. So this is like the most fun and the most intense hockey. Even with Matthew Tkachuk winning a Stanley Cup, this is different, and he's sharing it with his brothers. So it's meaningful for this U.S. team to have them in the lineup. But if they're not 100%, it makes you think of the margins between these two teams, between Team Canada and Team USA, and how narrow and how slim they are. And if you're not 100%, that can work as a detriment to your team. I'm not saying it'll be a defining factor, but it is a concern for me. And I put Auston Matthews in the same category. I mean, before this tournament even started, there was some concerns about his health. Would he even be able to play? And now you see he's limited in terms of what he's been able to do, what he's been able to do in terms of production. Yes, I expect him to play because this is the stage that they've wanted. They've wanted this situation. They've got it. They're going to be in uniform. They're going to play. It's just a matter of how impactful can they be. So that's what I'll be watching for, certainly in the final. And again, it's just, the will to win will determine which team wins this tournament. And that's what it's going to come down to. And when I think of it that way, I kind of lean towards the U.S. right now.
Okay. I'm glad you still said that, leaning towards the US, because and I think all of us have said it, they're the most complete roster, but the injuries, and as you mentioned, are they really going to be able to be fully involved? And then to what capacity? Because now everybody has to return back to their organizations and show up for their teams for the second half, the most crucial part of the hockey season. So a lot of question marks, but we'll see what takes place because I've heard that when you have that flag on your chest, you get tunnel vision and it just becomes a whole different game involved. Now, how can this impact the USA if they are slightly limited per se? Well, Matthew Tkachuk and Brady Tkachuk lead all of Four Nations tournament when it comes to shots on goal with 11 apiece. Then you got Matthew Tkachuk, who's going berserk when it comes to the high danger chances and opportunities. And you're going to need that versus Bennington because things are going to get really close, as you mentioned, Brick, with margins. Now, we got the news of Charlie McAvoy not being able to participate, and then we'll also touch on what that's going to do to the Bruins coming up here. But Sanderson might not be getting enough love on his name and his quality of play. I mean, he is the key defenseman for the Senators. I feel like he stepped up well enough, but with some changes potentially on the back end for USA going versus this high-powered offense in the Canada team, how do you think things are going to match up on the back end?
Well, when you listen to Mike Sullivan, the coach of the U.S. team, talk about a guy like Sanderson, he talks about how much he likes his hockey IQ. His skating ability allows him to be a good defending defenseman because he's able to gap up, he's able to use his stick, he's able to use his speed, he's able to close, he's able to read the play. He might not be that physical presence that maybe Charlie McAvoy gives you, but he can defend because of his other skill set. And I think they're pretty comfortable with him being in the lineup, and playing regular minutes. One of the things that is notable, when you say, well, does Team USA have a home rink advantage because it's at TD Garden and it should be a pro-US crowd? And I think really the only advantage is if you are the home team, you get that last change. And if you are looking for a specific matchup, perhaps, they're looking at Slavin and Faber to go against, McDavid. And that's really, I think, the only advantage you might have in terms of, the crowd, the home rink, etc. So you look at the back end, you look at the matchups, Sanderson in for McAvoy, basically, if you want to call it a 1-for-1 switch. You got to feel pretty comfortable. It's a significant loss to lose a guy like McAvoy. I thought he was okay in game one, but he was impactful in game two in this series, especially with the big hits that he had. And I don't even know if that was the matchup that they wanted at the time to have him out there against McDavid. But the way it worked to the U.S.'s favor to give him an opportunity to be physical. But for the U.S., it's going to come down to can they duplicate the defensive game plan that they executed in that game in Montreal on that Saturday. And it was more than just the fights. I mean, that's the emotional part of the game. Now it's how do you get focused and concentrate on playing another 59 minutes of complete, committed team defense. They believe in their goaltender. You feel like Hellebuyck's on a mission this year, given the way his postseason went last year. He's going to win the Vezina Trophy. And then people that are pro-Canada, they say, well, let's look at Binnington and the success he had in 2019 in this building in Game 7 against the Boston Bruins. And I give you that. And he's a cocky, confident kid, and that works for him. It works in his favor. But I also look at, well, that was in 2019. That was almost 6 years ago. What has he done in the postseason since? And I think he's like 4-10, playing for the St. Louis Blues. So, what do you lean on? What do you gather from? What do you believe in? What do you think works? What it comes down to, and I'll reiterate it because for me, it's always the theme when you get best on best. It's that will to win. Who's going to will themselves to win shift to shift, battle to battle, the danger areas, and how bad do you want it? And then, unless a team is far more superior in skill, chances are it's up for grabs. And the team that works and makes the fewest mistakes wins the hockey game.
Absolutely. Everybody says that football is a game of inches. I've always said hockey is a game of like milli inches, if it even exists. Playing devil's advocate a little bit, because you do mention Jordan Binnington, and he has had a pretty outstanding performance when need be, but also when going back to that high danger column, he stopped 25 of 26 high danger shots, 26 of 27 high danger shots. And he's hard to get past sometimes. And I know John Cooper is going to be throwing these lines in the blender. He's going to have some tricks up his sleeve. We saw some lines go out for practices saying that he might be putting together an all Tampa Bay Lightning line, the familiarity, the chemistry, the ability to attack. So in what ways do you think Canada might have that edge, as you mentioned, besides Binnington?
Well, my expectation, Kasey, is that you're going to see their top offensive guys play the majority of the hockey game. This is one game, winner take all. And they feel that they have probably maybe the 3 or 4 best players in this tournament in their lineup when you start talking about McDavid and MacKinnon and Makar and Crosby. So I expect those 4 guys to log, 20-plus minutes across the board, play in every situation, double shifts when need to. If there's icings, they're going to get offensive zone starts. Whatever they determine in terms of their combinations up front and their pairings on the back end, expect those 4 guys to be on the ice in every critical situation. And those are the 4 guys that should concern you the most if you're Team USA.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully they can pull from the Florida Panthers Stanley Cup run script and outdo them, outskate them, overwork them, outplay them, and wear them down. I mean, the Florida Panthers were really good at exhausting and minimizing that speed, because between MacKinnon and McDavid, the speed burst, that's where they lead when it comes to Four Nations. Before we wrap up our Four Nations conversation, got to ask, Brick, what's your prediction? Do you have a score prediction? I was put in the hot seat and Boston has entered the chat the other day. I think I'm going to stick with my prediction, though, but where'd you land?
I got 3-2 overtime USA.
Okay, I had 3-2, but they pulled it off right as the third period was winding down. I said under 3 minutes, USA scores. Clearly,
I want Team USA. I want Team USA's version of the golden goal this year.
Oh, that's a prediction. Yeah. I'm going to make sure that this is clipped right here, because I feel like it can so happen. I mean, the intensity and everything leading up to this is honestly, it's script. It is absolute script. But if you're enjoying this conversation pertaining to foreign nations, and as I mentioned, Boston Bruins breakdown coming up here shortly, make sure that you continue to watch Hockey Hub, like and subscribe to Hockey Hub here on NESN. It can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and wherever else you get and enjoy your podcasts. So we've touched on it. We've mentioned Charlie McAvoy being injured and being out. The news came out that he ended up having to go to the hospital. It went from an upper body injury to an infection. Now we find out earlier as well that he is not only still in the hospital, but that they're still monitoring everything. How is this going to impact the Boston Bruins immediately coming out of this break, coming out of Four Nations that's now been 2 weeks long?
Yeah, the word that scares me the most is infection. You're talking to somebody that had 10 major operations when he played, and, I was susceptible to infection. And that stuff keeps you in the hospital for a long time. That's the stuff that is dangerous. It's fatal at times. So you have to be really careful when you hear that word infection. And that's concerning. So, you want the best for Charlie. You certainly want him back on the ice because he's critical to the Bruins and any level of success that they're going to attain before this year is over. But he needs to get healthy. It's first and foremost. So that being said, you are so excited or anticipatory of what are the Bruins going to look like, the games leading up to the trade deadline, which path are they going to take based on the comments we've gotten from both the president and the general manager. Are they going to be sellers? Or do they feel like all we need to do is get into the dance, get into the tournament, and we can do some damage because we're going to get our other top defenseman back and Hampus Lindholm. We'll have McAvoy. We'll have something to prove. We know we haven't played up to our capabilities. We're letting down the Bruins organization as well as the fan base because we're not putting up wins. The last 2 games before the break were very disturbing because you had leads after 2 periods. You don't even get the games to overtime because loser points are critical right now if you're thinking about climbing back into the postseason mix. So the McAvoy situation has me very, very concerned about what this team's going to look like. That being said, you look at all the underlying numbers, and they're not great. They're not great. The numbers that really generally coincide with playoff teams aren't there for the Bruins. And then when you start looking at the core group, the strength down the middle, Zacha and Lindholm are really good players, but are they a 1-2 center combination? Charlie Coyle had a phenomenal playoff in 2019 because he was a third-line center. He gave you mismatches. He gave you dominance in those situations. That's when you know you have a good team. That's when you know you have a chance to win a Stanley Cup. So the things that you get a little concerned about, the goaltending, Swayman, at times he looked like he was getting back to form that he had last year in the postseason. He looked like that number one guy, that $9 million goaltender. And then, you get a little leaky or you give up some goals where you say needed a save there, even though it was a difficult save that was required. So goaltending, team defense, lack of top 2 defensemen available to you on your roster. Are you strong enough down the middle? Do you have young, exciting, fast, skilled talent enough to support in a third and fourth line situation? All those things have the Bruins fans concerned when you think about what's going to happen between now and March 7th. And the needle all seems to be pointing to, especially with the McAvoy situation now, seems to be leaning towards, I think we need to start selling assets in order to retool for the future. You don't want to give up on this season. You certainly don't want to give up trying to make the playoffs. And sometimes when you sell, the other guys seem to step up. Sometimes when you make a coaching change, and we saw this earlier this year, and we're seeing it in places around the league where you get this great, bounce back. What's happening in Detroit now? They're putting pressure on Boston, mostly because of the coaching change. So when things happen that are that dramatic and you can find ways to win hockey games, that would be the best situation. If you're a seller, yet you continue to win games, even though you're moving assets in order to improve your team down the line, in order to get more talented, more faster, more quicker, more talented, all of that stuff. So that's what it seems to me, Kasey, that the direction of this team is heading. And if you were on the fence, I think the McAvoy situation is kind of tilting you in the other direction.
Absolutely. And you mentioned a good point with the sellers and just kind of some of the things that the team might be looking to do, because where they're sitting numerically, they need something that's going to generate a spark. Like they're just kind of sitting very much like in the middle of the pack, middle of play right now. They enter right now coming out of Four Nations, 10th in the Eastern Conference. They're doing a fun dance with the Blue Jackets, both sitting at 60 points and looking through the window to try to tap on the door to get into the wild card spot, or get back into the wild card spot, I should say. Point variation, not too bad. A game or two in hand could be the biggest question mark here. We got a podcast for you called Respect Her Game, diving into all of the elements from Simone Biles to Caitlin Clark to all the top stories in sports. We've got you covered on NESN's Women in Sports podcast, Respect Her Game. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and wherever else you get and enjoy your podcast. I like that you mentioned Swayman, Brick. 2 weeks off for a goalie, not particularly ideal. Not that he's been off. He's been practicing with Team USA. But I know that when I've sat down and talked with Vasilevsky, he's the kind of player who he wants to get those reps in, that any time his team limits how many shots are coming at him is when he feels like his play gets stale. So how is this going to be impacted when the Bruins return, McAvoy out, some change up on the back end, and now you got Swayman who has to come in and really stand on his head to get this team into a postseason?
I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic because I'm glad he's been on the ice. I'm glad he's been in practices with the best players in the game. I'm glad he's been taking his reps in that situation, and he knows he has to approach practice as a backup goaltender, meaning, these are my games. I have to have practice as game situations in my mind, how I prep in case I get an opportunity to play in this tournament, but looking forward to when he gets back to Boston because he's going to use this as a reset. And I know during the year, you looked ahead and you look at certain breaks during the regular season, and sometimes you look forward to them in order to get that rest, clear your mind, get away from the game. But in this situation, I think he needed to be on the ice. I think he needed to get the reps while he's doing the reset in order to get ready. He knows what's on his shoulders in terms of responsibility. And if you look at the Bruins' schedule, he has a chance to play the majority of the game, certainly, before the trade deadline, and certainly before the end of the regular season, and especially if he gets hot. We know what a hot goaltender can do. It can carry a team. It can get you into the postseason. It can give your team believability. It can make you better than you think you actually are. It can supplement a lack of offense. When I said the numbers are concerning when you talk about the Bruins and how they playoff team, their road record, their special teams, the amount of penalties that they take, all that stuff, the goal differential, points that they've left on the table. All those things say this is not a playoff team based on the numbers. But if you have a goaltender that can do a reset, come in, play to his utmost capability, now you start to believe that, the Bruins do have good players. They do have enough depth. They have a guy named David Pastrnak who's having a spectacular, second half of the first 60% of the 70% of the season. It was a little slow out of the gate for him in terms of his level of play and his expectation. But, right before the break, the guy was on a roll. He was on a heater. So when you have that and you have leadership and you have good culture in the room and you have a goaltender, now you start to say, we can do this. We can do this. Even if we have to sell some parts that are pending UFAs, we don't see it happening. We need to go in another direction, but keep our core together. Hopefully McAvoy gets a nice recovery, speedy recovery, gets back in the lineup. You get Lindholm back. Now it's a different looking team and a different a belief that you can get the job done. And maybe that's the direction it goes. And I think that's all predicated on Swayman coming out of this Four Nations on top of his game.
Yeah, and I'm sure that he's going to know how much it's going to mean for him to come out and be just as sharp. But when you don't play and you get to practice with the best, I feel like you're going to be that much more hype to get back together with your team and perform for your team. You mentioned Pastrnak. Obviously, he was on a point heater. He was getting the job done. He's sitting at north of 60 points for his team, almost sitting at over, 1.3 point per matchup for any team. Can he pick up where he left off after this break? Because he was at the game the other night versus Sweden. I felt like he had that itch to be back on the ice. He's like, whatever team wins, but, I'm excited for this and what it's meant to the other players. So can he pick things back up?
Yeah, I think he was pretty disappointed that he wasn't part of this, this NHL-sanctioned event, the fact that it was Four Nations and, he's not from one of those Four Nations. And I think that was a little bothersome to him. I didn't have a conversation with him about it. I can't say that for certain, but I got to believe, especially when you're the hottest guy in the NHL and now the NHL's on center stage and you're not part of it, that's got to be a little disheartening. So, I think it's just going to fuel the fire. I think it's going to be, part of that. He knows what he's doing. He knows how successful he can be. He's grown as a player, his ability to create offense, his ability to make plays when teams overplay him, his ability to move the puck, I think has grown exponentially in his game. He has more assists than he does goals in his career. It tells you a little something. They're not all rebounds, So I think he has individual goals. I think he thinks he's, part of this leadership group that he can give more, he can help Marchand in the room a little bit more, but he can certainly help on the ice by playing and leading by example. And that has not always been his strength. High risk taker, turnover machine at times, as are a lot of the top offensive guys in the league, because you give them more rope, you give them more latitude, you give them an opportunity to make those high danger plays, because when they make them, it's pretty unique stuff, and it's entertaining, and it helps you win a lot of hockey games. So, but I think coming out of this break, the fact that he wasn't involved, the fact that he knows what he wants to do, the fact that he was on a heater going into it, I think he has every opportunity to pick up right where he left off.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like he's so humble, but every interview you see that spark in his eye. You kind of see that chip on his shoulder, like what he would have accomplished if he was able to participate. I feel like that fire is about to return as the Bruins get back in play, starting with the Ducks on Saturday. Now, Marchand and Lindholm, a part of Four Nations, obviously. Elias Lindholm, before the break, 29 points in 57 games, but then you've got Brad Marchand sitting at 44 points in 57 games. I feel like Brad Marchand's going to come into this feeling good. I mean, you get to play in the championship. He looks like he's been having such a time with Team Canada, but how do you think playing these 2 weeks, the level of compete, the intensity, the fun, everything that's been encompassed in Four Nations, now you got to get back to the grind of the Bruins. How do you think these two are kind of pull on that to be a spark for their team?
Well, starting with Lindholm, you look at Team Sweden, they didn't lose. I don't think they lost a game in regulation, right? They lost 2 in overtime and they won. So, he was in a situation, given the talent level on that team and where he was slotted, he was more of a third or fourth line guy, played center, was asked to do, more of the defensive part of the game. They weren't looking for him to be a bumper on the power play. And all that changes when he comes back to Boston. He's a $7+ million a year guy. The numbers haven't been there. The production hasn't been there. So the pressure's been there because of the expectation. But again, a chance for the reset, a refocus. I think he really enjoyed playing for his country and playing with the other fellow Swede players. And now he gets a chance to come back and almost say, you didn't make a mistake by giving me the contract that you gave me. I am going to add to all the little things that I do well. I'm still going to be strong in the face-off circle. I'm still going to make good offensive plays. I am going to be that strength down the middle guy. I'm going to get the job done. I'm going to make my wingers better, and I'm not going to be a third line guy. I'm going to be a top 6 guy, and I'm going to produce. And I think the experience of playing in this best on best reminds him, if he needed it, it reminds him of just how good of a player he is. And my expectation is that it should be beneficial for him individually coming out of the break. As far as Brad Marchand goes, I just love the way this kid approaches this whole Four Nations. He's eating it up. He's soaking it all in. He's loving being a part of Canada, regardless if he plays 5 minutes a night or 15 minutes a night or 20 minutes a night. He wants to be a part of a winning culture, and he brings that leadership and his unique approach to the leadership quotient into that room, and that room's full of leaders. And I think that a chance to step away from the pressures that have been on his shoulders all year long as that next guy, the guy that, Chara passed the torch to Bergeron, or passed it to Marchand, and the pressure that goes with that, the responsibility that goes with that, especially a guy that has such a checkered past when it comes to walking the line and playing the game the right way. So I think getting away from the pressures of being, the leader of the Bruins, a Bruins team that's underperformed. Again, I'm maybe this is rose-colored glasses, but I think it benefits him as a player as well. And I think to be able to be on the ice with the best players from Team Canada, their ability to make plays, move pucks, play the game fast, play it quick, play it at a high level will only benefit him as well, because there have been times this year where then that's been a struggle for him. And a lot of that goes back to the last offseason and his inability to train. And you can't catch up during the regular season because it's just not possible. So maybe this experience helps accelerate that part of his game moving forward.
Yeah, I think that Marchand had himself a number of fans, new fans that just fell in love with like the character that he is, how the room responds to him. I love the videos of him going in the locker room and like his little things that he says to Jack Hughes and giving Sidney Crosby heat for, being a great player and stuff. So I feel like a lot of people are starting to gravitate towards Marchand and probably going to look forward to what he's going to bring back to the ice for the Bruins. Now, you mentioned the trade deadline coming up and how they're probably should approach this. Are there any names in mind? This doesn't have to be per, conversations or anything that you've heard, but like anything that jumps out to you that's like, this guy would be, a fun fit or probably a good spark in Boston.
Yeah, the names that I'm interested in, Casey, are more tailor-made for an off season, a summertime, June draft kind of blockbuster trade. I think back to when the Bruins were going to trade one of their goaltenders, and you knew it was going to be Ullmark. And here's a Vezina, goalie resume guy. Had a 40-win season, all-time, record for the Bruins in one season, and just a terrific goalie. And can you afford the tandem? Can you pay both those guys the money that's commensurate with their abilities at that one position? And obviously the Bruins said we can't do it. We're going to roll with Swayman. So they're going to deal Ullmark. And, I thought maybe you were looking at a blockbuster deal where it was multiple players, but it's so hard to make those deals in this league because of the no trade, no movement, salary cap. And the deal was made. The Bruins, it looked like they wanted to get in the first round of the draft and in that summer. And then, the deal that Ottawa made was, well, you're going to take a goaltender back, and that's how they get Korpisalo, and then the money issue. So I thought there was a potential there for a big trade. I think there's potential for a big trade this offseason if that's the direction the Bruins think they need to go, or feel that it's a must and it's best for the organization. That's above my pay grade. That's for the other guys to determine. But when I look at this team, you knew it was coming. You knew it was coming. No more Bergeron, no more Krejci. Who's going to be that centerman that's going to be a number one guy that can play in every situation, be one of the best players in the game, distribute the puck, get the most out of Pasternak or whoever his wingers are. And I don't think they're there. So that's what I'd be looking for. And that doesn't pertain to a trading deadline deal. That's not how it happens. I look more at the Bruins for a trading deadline is, the UFAs, and are those guys part of our future? What are we willing to pay them? The good news is the cap has really strengthened. Kudos to the NHL, going all the way back to the pandemic, and to keep the salary cap flat when it should have reduced during that time. When we had no spectators in the stands. They were able to keep it a flat and to survive because there were plenty of guys with multi-year deals, with multi-million-dollar salaries, term and money that they had to make work. And now look where the league is at. And the Four Nations, I think, is a great example, going back to a little bit of surprise for me. Going back to the Four Nations, how successful it's been and the hold that it has on the sports community right now, the ideal final that they get, and you combine that with the fact that they're going back to the Olympics, you're going to have a World Cup, and the salary cap is jumping. It is jumping, and I think that's all good news. So that's where the Bruins got to figure out the nickels and dimes, what works, how do they project, who's part of our future, who's not, what do we deal at the deadline, and in order to get assets, they don't have a lot of draft capital, that is attractive to other groups. So that means you have to look at existing players if you're going to be in that trade market.
Absolutely. Well, I'm hoping some interesting negotiations will take place after finally seeing some of the best go against each other in quite some time. I feel like GMs have now been inspired to maybe try to get some guys on their roster after seeing this. We'll see what makes moves. We've got that coming up here in March, and you said it, blockbuster. I feel like we're not far out from that. You got the cap bumping up, I think, 5% on that first mark heading into the summer. So it's going to give some wiggle room for some magic. But hold out hope, Bruins fans. Don't give it up yet. Bruins get ready to get back in action. As I mentioned beforehand, Ducks, Maple Leafs, Islanders, Penguins, wild over their next 5 games, and hopefully we'll get a positive update when it comes to McAvoy and his trending health. More importantly, if you need a bit of a positive spark before we close out here on Hockey Hub, McAvoy did recently miss a chunk of games, 7 to be more specific, between January 14th and January 28th, and the Bruins were able to collect 4 wins and heading to a shootout versus the Senators. So they get that back in solid. Swayman is inspired, and hopefully we'll see some good play as McAvoy trends in a healthier direction. Brick, can't thank you enough for your insight and for all of the Four Nations breakdown, what we should look forward to when the Bruins get back in action. But if you want more on all of the top sports going down around Boston and then some, make sure that you are staying tuned and watching. Boston has entered the chat here on Nesson, hosted by George, Travis, and myself. And you can catch Boston has entered the chat, available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and wherever else you not only get your podcast, but enjoy your podcast. Joining us now here on Hockey Hub on Nesson, three-time Stanley Cup champion and forward for the Blackhawks, Pat Maroon. Pat, I know you're running right now, so of course it's weird to say how are you doing, but it's been a long time. So how are you?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm good. You're in the winter coat. I'm getting used to the winter here in Boston, but that's neither here nor there. I'm a big fan of your journey throughout the NHL, how everything got started for you. You're no stranger to international play. So, of course, the first question is what you have made of Four Nations so far.
Yeah, it's been amazing. What the NHL came to us with this Four Nations thing and putting the best product out on the ice and the best players, and everyone's has definitely represented their country very well. So it's been really fun to watch. It's been really fast, high-paced tempo. Obviously the Canada-U.S. game, I mean, you can't top that. 3 fights in 9 seconds. People representing their country, playing for their country, and also playing for the crest in front of their jersey. And what Miller and Tkachuk did, and Hagel and Bennett and Parenko, I mean, it's just amazing. And just the game on top of that too. So it's been really fun. I think the NHL has really brought some new faces now. They got a lot of traction, and everyone's listening now, and everyone's watching, and everyone's tuning in. So I think people that didn't watch hockey, or people that were on ESPN talking football, baseball, and everything else, and NBA, and I think now they're all talking about hockey. So it's just a way that it takes the next step for the NHL. So really happy about the product and what those players have accomplished, leading up to the championship game. So been really fun to watch.
Yeah, you mentioned it becoming more popular, and hopefully they'll start talking about it the way they talk about football. But it's what it does for Americans and American hockey. I mean, you being an American player, making an impact. We talked with Jeremy Romick the other day. So what do you make of it, how the American players and kids, especially in the South, are now starting to get more into hockey?
Yeah, it's huge. It's a huge impact on the game. Obviously, USA hasn't been, they've been falling short a lot lately, and but I think now we have a new generation of players that they all play a different role. There's so many different types of players on the USA team, and it's been fun to watch. And I think what they have done from the program and from all the AAA programs, all the AA programs, and what they've done, USA Hockey, to get these players to where they are now is pretty remarkable. It's growing the game rapidly right now. And, what the Tkachuk boys did, because I'm from St. Louis and they're from St. Louis, I think they got a whole new audience. And, that's awesome because, their father obviously played a long time, should be in the Hall of Fame, but he's got 2 kids with grit and a lot of talent. And, what they did for not only St. Louis hockey, but everything around, like you said, in the South. I think people are really tuning into that. But it's honestly been fun to watch. The hockey's been great. And I'm proud to be an American, so I hope the USA wins. They come out with the whatever they're calling it, the gold medal game or whatever they're calling it. But like I said before, but being from St. Louis, I think the Tkachuk boys have done a really great job of, I think they got a lot of new fans now in the St. Louis hockey that are probably signing up this coming summer.
Yeah, somebody was tweeting about the fact that it might be hard to cheer for them, but you can't not cheer for them because of what they're doing in Four Nations right now, regardless of teams and favoritism. But you kind of mentioned generations and kind of that younger talent. You play with what everyone calls a generational talent, Connor Bedard. And some fans were wondering, was it bad that he didn't make the Canada roster? And what did that mean? So you can speak to that now, playing alongside of him. What did you think?
Yeah, I think, listen, I mean, he's still young. I think people forget that he's still 19 years old, and, he's still going through the growing pains of being in the NHL and being a part of an NHL team. And he's still trying to, just be a competitor every single night. But I'm sure that put a fire in his butt a little bit because he's done an amazing job the last, since the team was made. I think he's got over a point per game, and he's been getting points at a rapid pace. So, listen, that's above my pay grade. I don't know who's making those decisions, but obviously Canada's a very talented team and with a lot of skill. It seems like they went a little more grittier this year. and a little more, pesky players that play a 200-foot game. So obviously it's a little different, but I'm sure he has an eye on that for next year. The Olympics is next year, so he's got to keep working hard, and that should piss him off a little bit to find a way to get on that team.
No, for sure. You mentioned pesky players. I have one in mind on the Canada roster. You played with him at Tampa Bay. Did you give Brandon Hagel chirping tips? Since when did he? He's rowdy. He's so rowdy this past season. I'm a big fan of it, but he's over here showing he's got that dog in him. What's it been like seeing Brandon Hagel's play for Canada?
He's deserved it for sure. He's playing really good hockey. I think people forget too. He's so good. He works his butt off, and he wins those 50-50 battles every time. He comes off the puck. He works hard. He's got great speed, and he's got that dog in him, like you said. He never gives up on plays, and he earned his spot on that team. And Brendan Hagel can also make really good hockey plays. He's got really good hockey IQ, and it's a guy like Cirelli too. They're kind of the same players with some upside and a really good skill, but they're not afraid to back down from anyone. They work hard. Like I said, they win their 50-50s, but they also never give up on plays. You think they're out of the play, and then somehow they come back, they get the puck back, and, it's a transition. Sometimes it's a scoring chance. So they deserved it. They're playing very well this year, and I'm very happy for them.
Yeah, for sure. Some people are wondering if they should be nervous because, of course, Cooper is running the team, and then they're talking about them putting together the Lightning line with Point and Cirelli and Hagel. Could they be challenging? Because Hagel's ready to get back out there and spill more blood, I would say.
Yeah, I think so with his comments. So, like I said, though, these guys are playing for their country. They're playing for the guys that are watching and the fans that are watching, and they're doing a really good job of that. So, obviously, both teams are probably out for blood, but most importantly, like I said, they're playing for the crest in front of their jersey, and they're playing for their country, and they take pride in that. So I don't know if we'll get the excitement like we did the first 9 seconds, but it's going to be a great game and a lot of intensity.
Yeah, we don't need it the first 9 seconds this time. We just need a USA win. I'm going to pivot back to you, though, Pat. One of the times that we got a chance to chit-chat, I asked you what was in your headphones. I was surprised, not that you listen to country music, but that you were listening to calm, chill country music, and you play like you're listening to Bodies by Drowning Pool. What's in the headphones these days? How do you get amped up?
Country still. I have a big kick with Sam Barber right now. I'm a fan of just good music. I'm a 90s guy too. I love 90s soft rock or whatever you call it. Hootie and the Blowfish. A lot of good stuff. I'm everywhere too. I can go EDM sometimes too. So it depends on what I like. But mostly in the car, it's now podcast or it's like I said, Sam Barber radio right now. It's on the car every time I can get in there. A good podcast.
All right, so the self amping up is probably what really takes place for you. But we got to know you're one of the top guys for getting that mental battle going on the ice. You've probably had some fun chirp offs with any other guy that you've competed against. Who's kind of giving you a run for your money when it comes to going lip for lip on the ice?
Well, I would say Marchand has done a good job of. It's funny I got the opportunity to play with him and get to see the other side of him and being a part of it. But he does a good job. Matthew Tkachuk does a good job. But yeah, there's been some good battles. Drew Doughty, I've had some good battles with him. But I think the guy that kind of gives me the run for my money is probably Marshy. We've had some nice chirping battles, and Tkachuk. He's got some good one-liners too. But that's part of the game, and it's fun. It's fun to be a part of. It's fun to get chirped. You're engaged, or you're chirping. It gets you more engaged, and I'm a big fan of it, and I really enjoy it. So anytime someone comes at me, I kind of get a good chuckle out of it.
Oh gosh, I wish I could know. I know you guys probably can't say like how you start anticipating how you're going to piss off the other guy on the ice and how where the belt lies in that. I won't put you on the spot for that one, but you did get to see two sides of Marchand. You got to see the side that, you know, pisses you off, riles you up, pulls you into the fight on the ice, and you got to be a teammate alongside of him. How was that adjusting to his leadership style and his vocality? Because a lot of the clips coming out of Four Nation, you're seeing this goofy Marchand that's just sitting there chirping at and giving way to Crosby and other guys. So what did you learn from him from a leadership perspective?
Well, I learned a lot. I think just the culture in that locker room, the standard they set with every player, from player to player to coach. I think the way they handle their situations and they go out there, basically their day-to-day life. And when it comes game time, they do a good job of staying composed, staying patient, and, you know, saying the right things and knowing when to talk at the right time when we need it, and knowing when to amp it up when, you know, when you need to have a deep conversation or snap on some guys. But he does a really good job of pulling people into the fight. He's just not a leader in the locker room. He's a leader on the ice. He pulls guys into the fight. He gets them on the bus, and, you know, you kind of follow him, right? His intensity on the ice and the way he manages it, you know, his emotion. But you know, with all those guys in the locker room, with, you know, from hearing in the past, you know, Patrice Bergeron kind of, and Char kind of leading the way, and, you know, Marshy, you know, following and learning from them and learning from the best that have been in the game for a long time. And it's special to play with those guys. And now you got Pastrnak kind of taking the wave too, from learning from Marshy and McAvoy. You got guys like that are in the room that are learning from Marshy now. So very fun to be a part of. They hold a high standard in the locker room, and they take pride for wearing that Bruins jersey. And it was a really fun time to get an opportunity to play for those guys, and I learned a lot.
Yeah, I feel like you got the chance to play with a lot of special players and be on a lot of cool rosters. But another hot seat moment for you, Pat. If you got one game, top game of your entire life and career, you can equate it to the Stanley Cup if you want to, and you get to pick your line mates, dead or alive. Who are the two guys playing with you?
Oh, man. I would say Crosby. Like, I'll do my generation because it's, you know, I've been with it.
Okay.
I mean, we can always go say, I mean, I'd love to play Wayne Gretzky. He's the best player of all time. But, like, for me, it would be, like, Crosby, McDavid, or, yeah, probably Crosby, McDavid.
All right, I'll take that. You had some time with McDavid, not Crosby, but that would be a good one. If you could customize your helmet, what would you put on it?
In what way? Like stickers?
Like how goalies customize their helmet, how they put something.
That would be, I don't know what I'd put on it. I'd really have to think about that one.
All right.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe my kids' faces. I don't know.
A combination of things. I mean, mine's easy. Yeah. I always put Rolling Stones on everything. My laptop, my bags, it's ingrained in everything.
Maybe Hootie the Blowfish Band.
There you go. You can do Hootie, you can do your kids, you can add all that into it. Any final predictions for USA versus Canada? You said you don't see the gloves probably dropping in the first 9 seconds, but what do you predict happens with this matchup?
I think it's going to be a tight game. I think it's going to be close, but obviously I truly want USA to win. I think obviously what they've done, and now the whole nation's watching right now, and it's USA is obviously it's building the hockey across the market everywhere, like you said before. So maybe I'm predicting a 3-2 win USA.
All right, 3-2. I like that. I said 3-2 with 3 minutes left in the third period. USA scores. Make it interesting.
There you go.
That's what I'm hoping pans out. And then maybe a fight between Marchie and Tkachuk. Let's see how that one plays out. Just to add to the intensity here in Boston. Pat, I know you're busy. I really appreciate you taking the time to come chat with me here on Hockey Hub. If you love the Hockey Hub content, as you should, make sure that you're following NESN on all social media accounts. Make sure you downloaded NESN 360 on the app. And more importantly, make sure you're following, liking, and subscribing to Hockey Hub wherever you like and enjoy your podcast, as well as YouTube.